Hello and welcome to the Indie Bandits podcast or live streamed marketing clinic. If you're joining us in the present, if you're joining us from the future, you may be watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast. If you haven't joined us before, just a quick reminder this is a regular series of podcast streams and videos that we're doing on how to market your indie game and offering up our advice on how you can market your indie game better because we did a little report. We pulled our community and found out that the long and short of it is that they're not doing enough marketing for their indie games, at least not to make them as successful as they would like them to be. So we thought we'd set about to help try and change that. This is a bit of a work in progress. Our podcast stream. We're finding our feet with the format, so feedback's always appreciated. If you're listening on your podcast app of choice, then feel free to subscribe and leave a comment, leave a rating. We'd love 5 stars, but you don't have to. Obviously, actionable feedback is always welcome. Same if you're watching it on Twitch or back on YouTube. Feedback's always welcome. We'll try and make these as useful as we can for indie devs. So I'm Joe, and as always, I'm joined by Jimmy. If you want to do, well, I'm going to challenge you now. You'll see Jimmy if you're on stream, but if you're listening to the podcast, you won't have heard him yet. But get ready for his dulcet tones because they might be changing in the coming weeks, James.
It might be.
So I'm challenging you as always to quickly introduce yourself and say why people should listen to you. If you've listened to previous episodes, you'll know, but make it snap. This is the elevator pitch for why people should listen to you, Jim.
I've been a content marketer and copywriter for over a decade. And my day job is doing content marketing and marketing strategies for B2B businesses mainly, with some B2C businesses. So this is something I get paid to do. I like to think I have some idea of how to do marketing.
Not on Indie Bandits, I might add, just before you start ripping into our budget, Jimmy. We do this out of the kindness of our hearts, but if you do want to throw some money our way, there is a nice call to action for Patreon. If you want to support us on Patreon, we've got a load of tiers and perks that we think are easily worth the amount you have to subscribe at. But it also helps us to keep the lights on here. As you can see, we have very limited lighting if you're watching this on Twitch. And as for myself, I'm a translator and copywriter with a background in marketing as well, and specializing in marketing and business texts. So I, like Jimmy, during the day in Bruce Wayne mode, I guess we can call it, we get paid to do this kind of stuff. But because we're fans of indie games, we kind of do this for free on the side because we love indie games and we like to celebrate them, which is what Indie Bandits is all about.
Yeah, we'd like to do it more, but there comes a point at which it's impossible to do it more with other things going on unless we can turn this into something that's can replace, I guess, part of what we do for our day jobs.
Well, that's the excellent thing about our day jobs because we're both self-employed and we choose our own schedules in a way. It means that the more support we get through Patreon, the more that we can make Indie Bandits the day job and the less uh, we have to do anything else. I mean, in a dream world, imagine how cool that would be. Just we'd be Batman all the time. Going back to my previous reference about Bruce Wayne, I mean, that might be your voice next week once you've once you've said goodbye to some glands. That's an awful phrasing. I'm
Yeah.
very sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what which way the pitch is going to go until the old tonsils start to heal up, or the lack of tonsils to heal up.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. Oh, it'd be so cool if you ended up with an awesome voice. Anyway, let's go back to why we're here and not talk about surgery. Um, so as I'd mentioned in previous sessions, we've talked about the State of Independence game report that we put together, which is available on the website indiebandits.com. If you want to check that out, there's some lovely visuals explaining just how indie devs are marketing their games and what the common trends are amongst indie devs. And the sad trend is that there's not enough marketing being done. So we'll keep working towards trying to change this. Last time out, we spoke about the purchase or sales funnel and how it's just a useful model to, I guess, visualize and understand the journey that any potential customer or player of your game will go on before buying and playing your game. And this allows you to basically work out what kind of marketing and what kind of messaging you should be putting across to people based on where they are in this theoretical funnel.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I thought that was pretty good, but why would you feel that the purchase funnel is a useful model? Have you got any tips or any ways to unpack the funnel and why it is such a useful tool?
Well, I think you pretty much just nailed it there.
I'm class, I
It's a
know, but
it's a good way to well, it's a good thing to understand first of all, because understanding the customer journey is essential to understand how you can interact with that customer, which different stages of the purchasing cycle, I guess, customers go through, and how you can interact with them at each of those stages, and what types of content works best at each stage of the funnel. So understanding it, and there are like a million resources out there to go and look at to help you understand marketing or sales funnels. So do that, um, build one, and I guess start creating content to interact and engage with people at each stage of that funnel. But it's certainly something to learn. It doesn't take long to learn either. It's not an overly complicated thing.
well, that leads us perfectly into what we plan to talk about today, and that is basically the indie game marketing starter kit, which isn't a thing. This is something we've sort of devised as what we believe every game dev, especially indie devs, because you'll be doing the marketing yourself most likely, because you won't have an entire marketing department to take care of it. So we're thinking about the things that the absolute essentials that you'll
Mm.
need to get started. The things that without them you'll never be able to market your game, or it just won't be enough. And we've already said that most indie devs aren't doing enough marketing, and even with I think everything in this, I would say it's still not enough. But we'll be going through this sort of journey as we do these clinics,
A
and
good start, though, isn't it?
this is the jumping off point. I think if you've just started developing your game, then these are the things that you should just maybe have from day one, and or start building, because we'll get into some content later on, and I don't expect everyone to make all the marketing content for their game before they've even made the game, but they're all things that they should be at least starting with on day one. So I've split this into a few sections which lines up with the funnel, and I mean, we could call it top, middle, and bottom of funnel if you want. But I've split this into how will players find out about your game, and how will players engage with your game, or how will you engage with said players once they found out about your game, and finally, how will you convince engaged players to buy your game? And I think as we go through each of these sections, which can line up with a marketing funnel, I'll talk about the kind of things you should have in terms of marketing material. So I think I've got some data here, Jimmy, and I'm starting with how will players find out about your game. And I think in the digital age, social media has to be one of the first things you start and set up when developing your game.
Yeah.
Especially given that it's free.
Yeah,
Like,
there's no reason to not do it.
and obviously there are a lot of different social media platforms out there, and I've got some good numbers here for them. But obviously at Indie Bandits, we get most of our engagement through Twitter, which is actually the smallest social media platform that I've got here in my list of important social media platforms, which is therein lies the problem, I guess. I think would be a way to put it. Twitter gets excellent engagement with indie devs, and there's an excellent community there for indie devs. But as a marketing tool, the engagement you get on Twitter needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, because a lot of times you're acting within a bubble. You're acting within a bubble that of other devs who may not necessarily be your end consumer. Even if every one of the, every other indie dev bought your indie game, that still probably wouldn't be enough purchases for it to be a viable product, or at least match the sales goals that you'd set yourself for it to be a successful game. And I'm not saying, AAA levels of sales, but I honestly think the engagement that Twitter achieves is misleading to a lot of devs. I think a lot of devs think that the high levels of engagement they get on Twitter will relate directly to sales. And sadly, it isn't the case because they're not potential players. They are other devs who are automatically interested in projects.
Yeah, I mean, there will be obviously players on there as well, but the thing with, I think, most free forms of social media, whichever of these platforms you use the most, is you should just use them for that awareness, really, that top of funnel awareness. I wouldn't be going to any of these platforms using only the free versions of them and thinking that you're going to be able to generate huge sales through that. So just go into it thinking this is a great way for me to get content out about my game, build awareness about my brand, my game, all for free at, or at the cost of your own time, and just use it for that reason. If obviously you make sales through them, then great. But I think you'll be very disappointed if you decide that Twitter's going to be your main marketing channel. And you're just going to use the free version, and you're just going to tweet about your game every day, and somehow that's going to lead to hundreds of thousands of downloads. So yeah, just be aware of the fact that social media, organic or free social media, is great for awareness, but not so great for conversions.
This is why I've put it at the very top of our theoretical funnel. This is how players, may find out about your game, but this is where it exists to inform them that the product exists and then lead potential players into engaging further with your product on things we'll get into later. But I had to have that big asterisk next to Twitter because obviously, most of our social media engagement is through Twitter because we're interacting with indie devs. So for us, it's absolutely great. Like it's a wonderful platform, but we're offering something that is for indie devs. Indie Bandits is for independent game developers. So when we interact on Twitter, it's brilliant for us, but we're not pushing a product to the wider market or just the game playing audience out there. And I sadly chat with a lot of devs, and as we're promoting their games and putting messaging out about their games, I always ask them about their presence on other social media, and so many times I hear, "Oh, we don't do that," or "We don't do that," or "We're just on Twitter," or "We're just uh, focusing on Twitter at the minute." Ruben Sprites in the chat adds, "Twitter's like LinkedIn for indie devs," which is actually really good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it fills that kind of like professional sphere for social media, and it's great to learn from other devs. Like if you want to go out and meet other devs and get help with your game, then Twitter's an excellent social media platform to be on. But
sort
as
of
I
networking tool as well for like industry.
absolutely, but for marketing and selling your game, it's actually one of the smaller platforms. And just, I mean, you've seen my list, Jimmy, because you have the show notes, but it's behind it's behind Pinterest. If I'm not much of a Pinterest user, and I don't think I'm much of their target market, but it's behind Pinterest, way behind TikTok, way behind Instagram, YouTube. Though not necessarily social, it kind of sits in this top of funnel bit as well because the engagement is broader. I think you get from YouTube, and finally Facebook. And
Yeah,
I think people forget about Facebook because
it's not cool to be on it anymore.
it's not cool for numerous reasons, but also because I think it's because of how much the growth of Facebook slowed. I think in people's minds they see it as a platform that doesn't have many users on it, but it's actually just the rate of growth that's slowed. Like all those users
Yeah.
that ended up on Facebook are still there. And look, we
I mean,
we
yeah, Twitter's obviously the smallest of them, but we're still talking about nearly half a billion people using that platform.
absolutely
So,
like
you still got a sizable audience on there. But yeah, the key thing is I think, Twitter for sure, what we're seeing, but I would say across all of these social media channels, you should really view them all as a way to simply get more people to be aware of your game, your brand. I would go into it, especially as I say, if you're just going to do the free version, as in you're just going to be a user on the platform, you're not going to pay for any additional marketing or advertising on the platform, then I wouldn't expect too much in return in terms of sales of your game because it's so hard. Organic reach on these platforms is almost zero. So thinking that you're going to put a sales message out there and every single person that's following you or following a hashtag or part of a group on these platforms is going to see that and then click through and buy your game, that's not the way it works. So I would say just use these. This is sort of the minimum thing. You need to be on some of these platforms, some more than others, I would argue, uh, and use it as a way to build awareness of the game that you're making and your brand as well.
well yeah, and I think the platforms that you are on is down to that what your brand is or what your game is. Obviously there are demographic differences, and you know sadly marketing's been around for quite a while, and I think it grew up in the 50s. So marketing loves to put people into boxes. That's how it operates because you're making broad decisions. So I think in a modern 2022 uh mentality, marketing might seem quite dated in the way it puts people in boxes and everyone's a demographic. People are seen as numbers almost, but that's like honestly the most effective way to, until you're engaging with people. When you're at the top of the funnel, people are just their demographics. It's not particularly woke or friendly to say that, but these platforms have specific demographics, and when you're throwing out a broad message, you need to understand these and make assumptions. Obviously, you can't do that on an individual level. You can't make these assumptions of one individual person, but at a macro level, we can comfortably make these assumptions, based on, gender splits, age splits, all these kind of demographic splits that exist on these platforms are something worth considering when when you're making a game and you know that it may appeal more to one demographic than another. These do exist. That doesn't mean one type of person can't play your game because they don't fit in that demographic, but it means when you're trying to put out a marketing message to hit thousands of people, then you'll need to think about where that marketing message is actually being broadcast. And anyway, this is something I think devs will find as they start to use the platforms. They'll find spaces and communities that react and engage, and a lot of marketing is tweaking, sort of min maxing your effort. You start to find what works, which is why I had that addendum to Twitter, because that can give a false sense of it working. But literally, all Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and Twitter are all something that just sign up to them to have them. That's the one really really easy thing you can do right at the very start of making your game. Once you've if you don't have a name for your game and you have a name for your studio, then you can have, even though you are the studio, you can have just some presence on all of these platforms, and you'll have signed up to some of them before. It takes literal seconds to just, get that username, get that at, or get that / whatever on each of these channels. And I think that's probably one of the first things that anyone should be thinking about doing.
Yeah, and show up as well. If you're going to sign up for a Twitter account, then be active on the platform and be active consistently on the platform. The whole algorithm thing is designed on each of these. They're after engagement, they're after user engagement and audience engagement. And if you get involved and you get involved consistently, not only will your audience pay more attention to you, but the platforms will likely help promote you as well a little bit. I'm not going to say in a massive way, they absolutely won't do that, but they will help a little bit because you are doing the things they want you to be doing. There's no point in signing up for a creating a Facebook account for your game if you're then just not going to put any content on there. So, if you are time poor, which I know a lot of indie devs are, then pick one or two of these platforms and commit to that before you decide to spread across all of them. But you really do have to show up, and you have to show up consistently. Tweeting once a week is no one will ever see it. So you are going to do it, which you should. When you get involved, make sure you commit to it.
We've got a later episode uh, planned on this exact topic, but there are some free tools that can make social media management a lot easier. If people, there's a lot of platforms where you can actually, you can duplicate content and post the same thing out across, multiple socials at the same time or at different times or schedule stuff. And, it's work smart, not hard, isn't it? If you want to have
Yeah.
a regular content feed, like the odds are no one's going to lose their shit because you posted the same thing on Twitter and Facebook. Like there's not
No,
a obviously as you grow you
the
do
likelihood of people seeing both of those is minute anyway.
or either
If
of
someone
them.
sees it on Twitter, yeah, exactly. If someone sees it on Twitter, the chance they're going to see it on Facebook or vice versa or Instagram is tiny.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, well, especially Twitter, because of the nature of it, disappearing. I guess people don't often visit people's profiles; they keep an eye on the feed.
Feed. Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much.
No. Well, let's move on to the next thing I reckon every indie dev needs, and that is a website. We spoke about this, I think, during both our episode on funnels and also when we were just talking about the state of independent gaming. And I've noted the website can act as several stages of the funnel, but it'll be it's useful that you can have this and you're in full control of it. That we mentioned, building on rented land, whereas like a Steam page is useful, but it has to fit the format of Steam. The way Steam presents all the information, the way Steam has this little carousel of images, the way the descriptions over one side, the longer descriptions over another side. These are all things that you can control on your website, and it can act as the first introduction to your game. It can grab somebody's attention. You can front the visuals and the important information that you want to present to somebody, and then allow them to you know flow through that customer journey to purchase on your website. If you've controlled this really well, if the content's right. Obviously, I'm not going to say that like a website will convert 100% of people that land on it, but there's no reason someone can see your game elsewhere, quickly go to the website, and then be converted, or become a convert, especially early adopters. The kind of people who are going to be like the heroes for your game, who are going to champion your game. They're the kind of people who will see the flashy visual on the home page, and then immediately want to find out as much as they can about the game. And that's all that stuff, all that content is going to live on your website.
It just needs you need to have one. It's just it's not even up for debate. You need one. You have to have one so that when people find out about you on Twitter or Facebook or whatever channels you're using, the next thing they're going to want to do is find your website and read up about your game. And if you don't provide them with that opportunity and you make it very difficult for them to find out more about you and about your game, then they're very quickly going to lose interest in what it is you're offering them because people's attention spans online are terrible. And especially in that early stage,
Oh
if
yeah.
they're engaged with your brand and they're further down the funnel, their attention spans are actually just probably normal. But at the very, very beginning, everyone just wants to know why should I find out more about your game? This is the first I'm seeing of it. This tweet is the first I'm seeing of it. Why do I need to find out more about it? So, good content on the social media platform. And then if you hook them in, it's right, where can I find out more information? Okay, they've got a website. Great. Find out about the team, find out about the developers, find out about where the game's going, the features that are going to be added, the roadmap, all that sort of stuff. That's the stuff that will hook people and want them to find out more. And as you said, it can also be somewhere that helps push them further down the funnel, depending on the content and things, calls to action that you have on your website. But not having one is completely, uh,
Marketing suicide.
well, it's yeah. I don't know why you wouldn't have one. If you don't have one yet, then stop what you're doing and build one. It's unforgivable to not have a website. It's so easy to get them built these days, and you can probably do one yourself. It doesn't have to be anything special. It could literally be one page, a one-page website, which just tells people more about the game and tells them to sign up for a regular monthly email update. But you need your place, your flag in the ground on the internet where you can show people more about your game. So yeah, this is one of those, like, it's sad we even have to have a section of this about it. But you have to have a website. The fact that we're still saying this in 2022 is like mind blowing, but you have to have a website.
Well, Rudin asks, what about the store page? Is that no good for telling them about the game?
No. Well, yes, but no, because if that's someone else's property. So yes, obviously you need to be active on all the various different platforms where people probably buy your game. That's essential. So Steam or Itch, I think, is
Itch.
another one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a few of them. You've got to be active on all of them, of course, but you need somewhere that you own, place on the internet that's yours, that you control the content of, you control how it's how the content is displayed, uh, how you talk about your game, how you interact with how you interact with your consumers. So this is entirely your place on the web. You have to have it, and I think if nothing else, it kind of legitimizes the product just a little bit more if you have your own website. So it's well worth spending the time, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time. Getting a website, sorting it out, and as I say, like planting your flag.
Well, the thing is that on Steam, for example, yes, you can tell people about the game and you can direct people to them. But when we were talking about the funnels last time out, we're saying there's a lot of mid-level, middle of funnel marketing being missed with indie devs. So they're doing a lot of the top of funnel marketing, telling people about their game, and there's a lot of bottom of funnel where yeah, they're asking people to wish list, and they're missing this point where you engage with the audience, with with any interested parties, and then get them to do the desirable actions and accept, interact with these touch points that we mentioned last time out. You had I forget the exact number you mentioned, Jimmy, but there's a a theoretical golden number for touch points, and it's actually
Between
quite high.
7 and 11, depending on industry, I think.
Yeah, so you want that's that's not a hard and fast rule, but if you think about the
No,
average consumer needing to interact with your game at some point between 7 and 11 points before they purchase, a tweet about checking out the Steam page, well, there's one. Going on the Steam page and wish listing, that's two. Then do you actually have someone who will actually buy your game? Someone who's just saw it, went, that looked cool, and then went, yeah, I'll wish list it. Then where do they go when the game releases? For example, they'll get an email. Are they really sold? Is this an email that's gonna perk up their attention and go, yeah, I'll buy that game now that it's out? Or is this going to be something they'll have a fuzzy memory of and not particularly be really aware of? They'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. It looked cool. I'm not so sure about it now, or it's fell at the wrong time of the month. I'm waiting on my pay, or something like that. Whereas if there's somebody who saw the tweet, went to your website, got really excited about the product, then signed up to a an emailer to get the updates, or even was just idly reading through like a devlog or anything like that. Content that you got to control. You choose when it goes out. You choose when to interact with them. You choose when to literally how it's all done. This is this isn't a shop in the this isn't a shop in the mall, or like a place in the food court. This is your own restaurant. You gotta remember that Steam is like the food court. People walk in and you know what, everyone's hungry, and you're just one of many games there. Whereas if you can sadly, you are trying to turn people away from other games to turn them onto your game. And I think that's where that's where you're on your website. There isn't any other noise. It's your space, like you said, Jimmy. It's your flag in the ground. It's your home. It's your humble abode, little corner of the internet that belongs just to you.
Yes. These things are, especially like well, go back to the touch points. You mentioned three, and they're probably like the three minimum interactions that someone's going to do. They're going to see your game possibly on a social media platform. They may or may not wishlist your game. Then they may buy it when it comes out. That's three. So if you think the average is between 7 and 11, again, it's not a hard and fast rule, but if you plan to have between 7 and 11 touch points with your customers or with anyone that's interested, then you are more likely to make the sale when the game comes out than you would be if someone just followed those three initial things that everyone thinks is the only touch point that they need. Like, oh, that person saw my game. Oh, they wishlisted my game. That means when it comes out, they're going to buy my game. That's not how it works. They need to be reminded consistently about the game. They need to be made to be more excited about the game. They need to feel possibly like they are. Sometimes games are very good at fostering a community around their game, so they feel like they're a part of the game, even though they're not built it, but they feel like they're a part of it as the fan base. And all of that happens with the production of various different types of content at different points within the marketing funnel. And those are the things you need to plan to include on your website, across social media, all the different channels that you use to talk to people, so that you are hitting multiple touch points. The more you can talk with your customers or potential customers, the more likely they're going to be to buy your game when it releases.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so easy as well. Like the website, a website, we've said it doesn't have to be flashy. You don't have to sink,
No,
you don't have to sink weeks into planning or building this. The one page website is, I mean, it's not so much of a recent trend now. It's been going for a long while, but it's probably one of the latest developments in websites themselves. Just the idea of, you know, it's like a business card. That's what
like
the
a
one
brochure,
page,
isn't it?
yeah, the one page website. That as long as it's got all the key information, start with that. The website can build you can build content on it, but start with that. This is what the game is. Start with the elevator pitch, the text, the text, the visuals, the kind of things that people will see and go, that looks cool. I want to see, I want to see more for that. And then if they have that thought, if they go, I want to know more about this game. Hey, if you have a call to action right after all the cool stuff, that wish list button or emailer. Personally, I prefer the email sign up because, again, much like the website, that's yours. You own that.
Yes.
That's something, having someone's email means you can literally message them. You know, don't overdo it and turn them off you. Don't spam them, but you choose the messaging.
You also you choose like every aspect of that messaging. You choose how the messaging looks, how the messaging reads, when you can message that person. It's entirely, the ball is in your court. Obviously, you can completely screw it up, produce a terrible email, spam people, and they'll unsubscribe, and you're going to get unsubscribes anyway. That's the way it works. But you control it all, and that's the handy thing, because then you're in charge of the messaging, when it goes out, how it goes out, etc. And that means no matter what happens to any of these platforms, just say tomorrow Twitter goes down and you lose 3,000 followers on Twitter, you can't reach them anymore, or um,
A random billionaire
y-
buys the platform and completely changes how it runs.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Or like, Steam goes under overnight and oh, there you go, you've lost your storefront there. Well, if you've got a website and you've got an email list, you can still control how you interact with your potential customers. You can still interact with your potential customers. So having a website, having an email list and building that email list and using content to build that email list is again another one of those essentials for anyone, well, in any business, but in this specific case for indie development.
well, let's move on to the content because I've noted the last thing I've got for the people finding out about your game section is trailers and visuals. And this is something, I consider for top of funnel marketing materials, trailers essential. Like, obviously, you won't be able to have a trailer right from the get go because you won't have anything to make a trailer out of. When when you're putting together the first art assets for your game, and putting together some of the earliest lines of code, you won't have much to show off. But the second you've got enough content for that, I think a trailer is one of the first things you should show off. And little tip here from what I've seen, because I see a lot of trailers. We regularly share trailers on Indie Bandits, and a 3-minute trailer about the lore is probably not the ideal way to go, especially for your first trailer. You don't you know People are going to have very short attention spans at this stage during the funnel. This is a trailer you can share to people like who have subscribed to your mailing list, who have been known to open every emailer you send them to read every devlog you've put on your website. Those are the people who want the 3-minute trailer explaining the lore, diving into the world building, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing you should be working towards is a really short trailer that just shows off the game being played. I think most modern gamers can see what kind of game it is from gameplay. No one thinks when they're showing like weird like cutscenes, or I was going to say FMVs, like it's still the early noughties, but when you
Mhm.
see those kind of trailers for games, mobile games on television, like Clash or whatever's, and they've got this thing that's clearly not in game. Obviously, that's to put across an idea for maybe a different audience. But I think for an indie dev, know what the kind of audience that likes indie games is a more discerning player that won't be fooled by something that's not in engine and not actual gameplay. And just you want to show the product as the product that they'll be interested in buying. Zhuzh it up. Music, visuals, overlays, everything. The production can be good, but people will want to see what like playing the game actually involves across
Yeah,
30 seconds.
give someone a flavor of the experience they're going to have when they're playing the game. Show a little bit of the mechanic, show a bit of the artwork, some of the music, maybe some the music that sort of gives a feel for how it is to play the game, and try and put together the most polished 60 seconds you can, because you know people will judge it based on that. People do judge books by their covers with with games all the time. That's
Yeah.
mostly how people find out if they're interested in something to begin with, at least. And then, as you said, any of that other stuff, anything that goes into what the background of the story is, or the lore of the world that you're building, or some of the more intricate mechanics or features, you can put those on your YouTube channel or website so that when people are interested, there's a place for them to go to find out more about the game. So if you watch a trailer, you might think, oh, that looks cool. Oh, I like the way the combat looked there. I wonder if they've got any more videos on how that combat actually is in game. Oh, look, they've got a 4-minute video explaining the combat system and how that works. Fantastic. I'll watch that now. But that's available for someone to watch or engage with at their leisure. that thing you want to hit them with when they don't know anything about your game is that initial 60-second snapshot of this is what it's going to feel like to play my game so that you can, I guess, whet the appetite as much as possible before showing them all that other stuff that you're probably a little bit more passionate about because you've created the game, so you can really let the passion come through when you're doing all of the more intricate videos as well. Just because they're 3 or 4 minutes long and go into features or mechanics doesn't mean they can't be fun. Um, but definitely that initial one, that first trailer has to be eye catching and I guess just yeah, as I said before, give someone a real idea of the flavor of the game
Leave them
as
wanting
much as
more
possible.
so they can act
Yeah,
upon that interest, like you said, whet their appetite.
yeah.
This is the kind of those kind of things. That first trailer, the trailer that if you're going to send out to outlets, this is the trailer that has to have like really strong branding in it. Like no
Hmm.
one should be able to finish watching this trailer and not know the name of the game and not know where to go next.
Yeah.
Like um one question in the chat which leads into what I was going to mention. I think it's a good idea to wait till the visuals are in order before showing off the game. I was going to say these are some of the first things that I've reckoned for engaging people with the game. Obviously, early works in progress, etc., etc. I think obviously, if they are really early, I think they need to be labeled thus. Make it clear in certain things. Everyone sees the trailers with like early alpha footage, etc. Game in development kind of thing. You can make that clear. You should be able to build that stuff up anyway. But to give people a taste of the game, if gameplay is good, people especially the early adopters, they'll want to see what the game's going to play like. I think these very interested parties who look in early development games won't need the veneer as much, but this is all about working out who you're talking to. So if you're showing off a trailer to you know these sort of champions of your game, the people who are going to be really interested early on, I think they'll overlook some fuzz or some kind of not they'll ignore the lack of polish in the early stages of your development because they'll be interested in the core product of the actual gameplay itself. There's games if they hit the notes for me, if I see something, I'm not gonna go the graphics are shit because I'm like, well, this game isn't out for 3 years. Of course, the graphics are shit. They've just started making it. But know who you're talking to, know where you're putting it out. Obviously, if you're putting out a really general trailer and to other media outlets, this is why your website's useful because you know if the polish isn't there and you don't have all the excellent visuals for the kind of trailer that would be mass media broad appeal, then you can host that on your website knowing the only people who'll see it will people who are already interested in your game and will be more forgiving of some of its I guess visual shortcomings.
Yeah, I wouldn't undercut the value of showing off your works in progress, though. I think especially in the indie dev community, in the indie game community, sorry, people like to see you building in public. So yes, obviously, when you're putting out something that's supposed to be polished like a trailer, you want it to be as looking as good as possible. And if you've got possibly if you decide to put any money behind any promotional stuff on social media, you're probably going to want to use your most polished artwork and concept art or screenshots or anything like that. But I think, well, me personally, anyway, I like seeing the works in progress. I like seeing the doodles and the sketches and the ideas that people have. I like seeing the developer building in public because it makes me feel like I'm seeing the creation process, and I quite enjoy that. Just seeing the finished product all the time, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's still good, but I do like to see a little bit of the behind the scenes as it goes along. I think also it helps to humanize the person and the brand behind the game as well. Get a little peek behind the curtain, and it's quite intriguing to see how something like this is made. So I think a lot of indie devs are missing out on that. Actually, I think sometimes they're a bit too worried about the sorts of visuals they can show, but I think that the vast majority of people would like to see as much as they can from that indie dev, and also then it provides you with loads more content you can share. So I would say anything that's supposed to be polished or you're going to put some budget behind, I would put your best stuff out there. Anything that you are trying to get someone to do a call to action from, so sign up for my email list or wish list my game or buy my game, again, I would go for the more polished stuff. But I would also share regularly the behind the scenes stuff. So anything it doesn't have to be polished all the time. Share an idea you've had, share a little concept you've had, and put it out there. I think that sort of stuff works really well. And I think as well there should be a distinction between the types of trailers you can do. Um, the one we've discussed mainly to this point, you would say is an awareness piece. That initial 60 seconds. This is what my game's going to look and feel like. This gives you an idea of it. Hopefully, you'll be interested, and you might want to find out more. That's very much your top of funnel awareness, trying to get as many people as possible sharing it. Sort of trailer. When you get to your gameplay trailers, I would consider that to be a bottom of funnel piece of content. I think when I look for gameplay trailers, I'm almost sold on that game. I've probably watched a few trailers. I've followed that developer or publishing company on social media. I maybe signed up to their email list. I've probably found out as much as I could about the game prior to it coming out, all the different features, all the fun different things that I'm going to be excited about. When the gameplay trailer hits, that's one of the last things I need to see personally as a purchaser of games. Before I decide to buy that game, I need to see how the game is actually going to play and how someone might play it, whether that's someone from the um, production team playing it, or perhaps maybe a content creator on YouTube who's playing the game, who might be a little bit more unbiased about it as well. So I would say there's definitely a distinction between the different types of trailers. Some of them work better as bottom of funnel, and some of them work better as top of funnel. But say for either of them, you want to be putting your most polished work out there when it comes to a trailer.
I was gonna say if you don't make them trailers, then like you're saying, differentiating because there are different kinds of trailers. Then I might also add just a little asterisk here to be video content as well because they're not necessarily a trailer because a trailer is, in the broadest sense, showing quickly showing off the product to whet your appetite. Obviously,
Yeah.
the gameplay trailer is it's. I mean, I remember there was a time where they used to get called demos. I don't know if you remember getting demo discs,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
these were just unplayable demos, which was just a video of the game.
Yeah.
They called them unplayable demos, and this is all part of the like the last few things for helping people find out about your game, screenshots, work in progress, like you mentioned, Jimmy. But building in public, it's one of the biggest draws of indie game development that it's so it's so accessible to the potential player. They can see they can see everything, they can find out about it. It kind of brings like the idea of an auteur back to games, and promo art, key art, the screens, works in progress, all of this are stuff that you can you should be getting reams of anyway as you make a game. Games don't get built overnight, and people will be really in people who are interested in your game will be interested in watching like you work in Unity or Unreal. Like they'll even take the like, here's the level I'm putting together, and I'm just moving I'm moving some boxes around. People will be interested in that. You can sell that on the potential of what it's going to be. You say I'm putting this level together, but it's actually going to be like a cave or a dungeon. It's going to have like all this in it, but I'm just like mapping it out at the minute, and you know you can let someone's imagination start to run wild with that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Anyway,
Yeah.
should we move on
And
to
just
engaging with people now that they've
yep.
like heard about the game, and we'll go back to these are so once you've got the stuff the stuff set up, like we said, the socials, website, and some visual content. going, then you can start using this to, you know, push potential players along the funnel, get them interacting with your game. They've heard about it, they're interested on your website. This is where you're hosting, the stuff. I've a few ideas I've noted here is just like, a blog, updates, competitions or giveaways, and it was mentioned in the chat earlier, but your press kit will live on this on your website, because I see a lot, I'm going to start with press kits because sometimes they'll do my dial-in because you can't find them, and it's, unfortunately, at Indie Bandits, we focus on indie games. So I'll put the time in to find the content. But ideally, with a press kit, you get to choose and curate how other outlets will present your game. Because this is where anyone interested or anyone who's agreed to like do any coverage on your game will go to get content. So this is where you get to choose which screenshots will or won't be put into articles. So if there's something that's great for sharing with a really engaged audience who already likes your game and is happy to see a bit rough around the edges, work in progress stuff, you can keep that on your website, but you don't necessarily want to put that on the press kit and have, you know, if you're lucky enough to get a huge outlet cover it, you don't want them to be covering your game in the wrong light because they're showing it to everyone and their dog. So the press kit, like, has to be the good stuff. It has to be clear. It has to be nicely laid out and really obvious, and with loads of stuff that people can actually use. Like, I see so many press kits that have just one version of like the key art with separate the key art and like the logo, have them as two separate files. Things like this are absolutely great because it's so infuriating when you get to a press kit and there's only like one key art with like the name of the game in it, and you're like, that's not going to fit or be readable on a YouTube thumbnail, or as a a banner image across an article. Like, give them the assets separately, because some bigger outlets will have design teams that can put this together. There's a lot of stuff like, give them options, because these are people who are going to take the time to, in some cases, talk about your game for free. Make sure they've got everything they need, and make sure everything's in line with how you want to present your game to a wider audience that these people might be interested in showing your game off to.
Yeah, that's got to be the most polished thing in your arsenal at the press kit. Put your best stuff in there, everything you want someone to know about your game, and try and lead the way people will speak about your game through the press kit as well. I don't think there's enough you can put in there. I don't think there's too much you can put in a press kit. Um, and I think spending some time to properly figure out how that's going to look and how people will interact with it and the types of content they'll find within it is is sort of is going to be repaid a thousand times over. Um, the people, as you've already pointed out, the people that are going to pick this up and then use it to tell potentially thousands of other people about your game are so important to the potential success of your game, and the way they're going to find out and interact with your assets is via the press kit. So this is like a really, really, really important thing. I don't think you can spend too much time on it. I think it's one of those things you've really got to sit down and figure out what's going to go in it, how's it going to look, how great can we make this press kit, how how many fantastic screenshots can we put in there, different types of banners, all that sort of stuff. How can we explain our game in the most exciting way? What sort of maybe even I was thinking things like suggested social messages that people can put out about the game as well, with succinct messages about what the game's about. Because anytime you're making that person's job easier to produce content about your game, they're going to love that.
Yeah.
The press kit is like, it's so important. It's like, it can't be stressed enough how important the press kit is. I would say as well, and when it comes to this, how people engage with people once they find out about your game. I think a big part of it that possibly not enough people are doing is engage with them when they message you on social or if they tag you on social. Don't just kind of like the what they've done or
Yeah.
retweet what they've done. Like, start a conversation with them if they have said really looking forward to this and added you in that message, and you know start a conversation with that person, keep them engaged. And once you've had that conversation, maybe then after a couple of tweets, you can go, hey, look, you know what? You sound like you're interested in this. Would love it if you sign up to our email. We can talk to you then, send you even more cool stuff about our game. There's way too much of the someone tries to start a conversation and the indie dev might just be like, oh, cheers.
Or heart, like clicks the like button, clicks the little heart
Yeah.
button
And
on
it's like,
Twitter.
that person has literally just gone out of their way to start a conversation with you. Engage with them. The big part of social media is the social aspect of it. So get involved in conversations with your potential customers. You have no idea how much person potentially influence to buy your game. It's worth bringing them on side, especially if they're the ones who've made the first step in trying to have that conversation or interaction with you using something you've done. Make sure you put aside time every day to engage with people that are engaging with you and properly engage with them as well. Not that sort of like meaningless throwaway like button that you can click, which they may as well take it away. It's lost all meaning entirely now. You you want to properly interact with them when they take their time to interact with you. That's like that must be a tiny percentage of devs that are doing that. So you can immediately jump ahead of like the vast majority of
Yeah.
indie devs out there by just spending a bit more time on social media, engaging with people that have gone out of their way to engage with you.
Well, to add to that, the these kind of these kind of conversations is there's some when I used to teach English. I know they let Geordies teach English, but whatever.
Mm.
For exams, students were tasked with having a conversation, a really rudimentary conversation. But one of the tips was always like two non-native speakers of English would have to have a conversation with one another. So they both are like not great at having conversations. Just follow-up questions, literally like it's the easiest thing. Ending any message with like a question or a call to action or asking someone to do something is a way to keep that conversation going. Like, someone says your game looks really awesome. You go, thanks, man. Well, that's just that'll kill the conversation dead. And on social, for one, these are conversations that happen out in public. Obviously in DMs it's a bit different because they're not shown to everyone. But if someone engages with your game publicly on one of these on a social media platform, then one, this is something that these platforms want. Algorithms love this, like regular content. Having
Yep.
having engagement. This is this is worth its weight in gold. You can have a conversation. Not only that, but other people see this conversation, and if there's one thing that the internet loves, it's adding an opinion to something or butting in or chiming into someone else's conversation, and then you've got an entire thread of people chatting about your game. It might start with one person sending a message, and then you've got loads of people currently talking about your game, or some people saying a random tweet that's about like the 40th message in a conversation you're having with someone who's interested. Scrolling back through it to find out what it's all about and discovering your game. And this is these kind of, whether they're threads, comments, or whatever, these are the kind of things that these platforms want to show. These like long threads that are like really gaining traction. So, like Jimmy said, take the time to, you know, someone's taking the time to talk about your game or try to engage with you or try and start a conversation with you about your game. Take the time to talk to them about it. That's the social part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a dialogue. But just going back to the website, I'd mentioned the press kit that lives on there, and we started talking about socials. But I might also add that things like blogs and devlogs and regular updates are also hugely important because much
Yeah.
like socials with content, the internet loves regularly updated websites. Google won't tell you exactly what their algorithm is, but for SEO purposes, they like websites that are updated regularly with content and that with content that people visit. So, you know, it's also great for workflow just to, have the day, end of the month, look back, bit of retrospective. How much work have you done on your game? What have you got done? Write it down and publish it. And then, in like building in public, this is something people can engage with.
People
No,
like to know.
yeah,
People
no,
people like to know how things are coming along. You
no
know.
one's it
Like,
allows them to get interested in the products because they see they're like, oh, it's nearing completion. If you don't update people in 6 months, people are going to think your game's dead, or they'll just forget about it.
yeah,
They'll remember about it if they read about it every month, every week. Daily might be a bit much, but you can add daily updates. Super short. We're not saying write an essay every day, but it's also useful. Just kind of do all your work out in public. You're already probably planning what to do, working out what to do, looking back to see what you've achieved, from your to-do list. There's no reason you can't just also publish that. It's great content. Put that together with the screens of the stuff you were working on, sketches, anything that you were, the iterative process of your work. Put that out for everyone to see. You know what? It's also kind of a cheap way to get feedback. Look, whether you want it or not, people will offer feedback on the internet. If you also put out stuff for them to engage with, if you've made a change to some design or altered something and go, hey, here's what I was thinking. I thought this would be better. What do you think? That'll have, people will have an opinion on it. Yeah, great, it's much better, or no, I preferred it as before. That doesn't mean you should change the way you put in your game together because of that. Remember to correctly value people's opinions. Random person on the internet mightn't be the best person to direct the production of your game, but it is useful for engaging them with the game itself. How obviously you choose where to take your feedback from, but that doesn't mean you
yeah,
can't invite feedback as a really
no,
useful tool for one, collecting the feedback. Then you choose which ones to work on, or what you think is actionable, or what you think is useful. And also, it's a really useful tool for just gathering and getting engagement, getting people to interact with your product. This is part of the community. If people think like their feedback is being listened to and thought about, then when the game comes out, they'll absolutely feel like part of the whole process. They'll be like,
yeah,
"Oh, I
definitely.
remember when you," and you go, "Oh yeah, when you asked about this, I remember when they were making this level, they were thinking of doing this, and I said no, and they've done this." People want to, once they're hooked, they'll want to engage with it.
Yeah, just be careful how often you ask. It's your vision at the end of the day, and you know the best ideas for your game. Obviously, getting guidance from the people who are potentially going to buy it is fantastic, but just you don't want to be sort of taking their opinion every single time they offer it, or because then you just end up making a game by committee, and those are
Yeah.
the ones that end up, I'm assuming, being a mess, and probably something that ends up being far away from your original vision, just because someone came along and had an idea. You thought, oh yeah, all right, I'll do that. Or so just be careful how often you ask for advice, but there's certainly nothing wrong with sharing an idea and saying, what do you guys think? What would be the easiest way to implement this feature? Uh, what do you reckon if I put this in? Because that can possibly end up saving you time and making you sales. So certainly something to consider, but be careful with it, I guess.
Well, it's what they say about opinions and arseholes, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's also the reason why I like to front these sessions with like who we are and what we know. Like if someone's watching and it's like, well, I have 20 years experience in content marketing, then you don't need to listen to us. Do you know what I mean? Like this is like we try to make it very clear like who we're offering our opinions for and who can possibly, action them and learn from them. Obviously, if you know more than us, absolutely great. Then you don't need us. But if you're someone who can learn from us, then excellent. We're happy to be here. It's about choosing, whose opinions you listen to. But as an activity and just getting engagement, classic. What do you think of this? That's like the easiest question. Leading questions are good if you have information you want to
Yeah,
learn about. This is where this is where all this all the visual content you'll generate during the production of your game, whilst you're developing your game, there'll be so much content you come out of it. This is why it blows my mind that not more indie devs are using like Instagram. I'm it, it's such a visual platform, and
yeah,
it's maddening going, you could be throwing up stuff every day on your game.
multiple
And
times a day as well.
so, yeah, you could, literally just schedule posts throughout the day and have, you could have just screens going up constantly, screenshots, little clips that'll like like a play test or just a random, oh, I was testing this mechanic, I've just put it in. Here we go. Look at that. How cool does that look?
Thing
And
as well, just to interject, because we talked about this in the last one, and it will come up again because it comes up every single time I talk about stuff. That you cannot overshare with people that want to know about your game. If someone's sitting there going, "Oh, I'm not going to post 3 times a day on Instagram," people will stop following me. No, they won't. They will not. Absolutely not. If I'm following someone on Instagram, it's for visual reasons. It's because they are providing a visual diary of something that I find interesting. They multiple updates a day are not like, oh, that's too much. I'm not going to follow them anymore. Especially when it's a game. If that's something I'm considering purchasing, the more I know about it, the more likely I am to purchase.
well, the less issues
Unless
you
it
have to
becomes
dissuade,
yeah,
the less
unless it becomes
concerns.
something that's like something I don't want, which is not that you don't want my money at that point anyway. I'm not going to be someone who's worth playing your game. But if I'm like excited about a game, the more updates I get, the better. Whether that's Instagram screenshots or like gifs of mechanics in the game, or trailers or emails. That you can't do it enough because as well, I'm not going to see them all. Even that's someone who is engaged with the brand isn't going to see them all. So you can imagine people that are like behind me in the journey
Yeah.
are going to get a fraction of what you put out there. So you cannot overshare. At least I've never seen anyone reach the point where I've decided actually you're oversharing.
And if they
Um,
have, then
yeah,
you're probably not someone who would ever buy the game. If the kind of person who thinks three screenshots of the same game from the person making the game is too much, is probably not the person who's going to buy that game.
that's going to be the person who will pick on every tiny little thing that they don't like and make sure they let you know about it as well.
Yeah,
You probably don't want that person buying your game.
you want to drive them off. That kind of thing. It's like,
Yeah,
why are you here? That's some of the absolute madness of it. It's when people go, oh, I shared two pictures in one day and someone unfollowed us. It's like, you're fine. That person was never going to buy your game. Don't they're not a loss. Like them no longer
no, they're
being
not.
engaged is like, I mean, honestly,
Yep.
someone who thinks several posts from, especially if it's if it's an account dedicated to the game and or studio, they know what they're in for by following you. Do you know what I mean? There's no point where this person would think that like buying the game would be less content than two tweets or like three screenshots.
Yeah, and undersharing is far more detrimental to your commercial success than oversharing is. So think about it that way. If you think you're oversharing, you're probably not sharing enough.
Yeah. Let's move on to one last thing that I'd like to mention. We mentioned trailers before, but we meant in a more general sense of like video content. I've mentioned again, think about where potential players are in the journey, where they are in the funnel, to tailor potential trailers or video content to that. Obviously, the attention grabbing general shorter trailer is better at the top of the funnel where you have people who are just finding out for the first time. Obviously, if you have interested parties and people who are engaging and chomping at the bit to find out more about your game. That's where 4 or 5 minutes of you chatting about the game or the lore, or the world building, or even just a really intricate feature that you think's really cool. You can do that once you know where you're presenting this message, where you're broadcasting this message, and who to. If you have a segment in your mailing list that opens every email and has been subscribed for ages, and clicks on every link in your email, like these super engaged kind of potential players, then there's no reason you can't throw out an email at them of just like even something like really candid, like just you, the dev, talking to the camera for like 5 minutes about like something that's might sound like quite boring to the average consumer, but it's like really interesting to these people. But it's about working out, how far along are they in the journey. Obviously, with things like a mailing list and your website, this is why the website's important, because you have all these metrics, all this information on how engaged they are. You can see which people open every email like the second it lands in their inbox, the kind of people who are like clicking onto every link when you say check out this, check out that. These are the people where you can start really really engaging with them and really like getting to like the juicy center of your indie game, if indie games have juicy centers, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got the stuff. We've looked at how to find how people can find out about your game through socials and the website, and then we've mentioned about engaging with people on socials, website, trailer. Now I think it's time. This is the people who've done all these steps are the people who it might be time to. I was going to say push over the edge, push over a metaphorical edge, not make them go insane. I mean, you might want to make them go insane, but you know, whip them up into a frenzy where the only thing they can think of is buying your game. But I think this is the point where if you've seen them, they've engaged on socials, that they're signed up to your mailing list, they've wishlisted your game. They're literally like at the front door or the front gates if you live in a house or a castle, and now these are the last few things for marketing which I think are essential to clinch that sale. And the first one I put demo. I think we're both very pro demo,
Yeah.
and just at Indie Bandits in general, we are very pro demo. That's why we have our monthly demo disc article, because if a dev's taking the time to make a demo, because I know it's not easy, because you have to like basically put together a build of your game that works on its own, which isn't the whole game, and it's more work. But I think it's work that is just so essential for this last bit of the last touch point, the last it for many players, like that gameplay trailer you were talking about earlier, Jim. This will be the last point where they need convincing to buy the game. And I think the demo, if they have any doubts that the game might not be for them, or not as good as they thought it would be, or not worth their money, the demo is the point where they'll change their mind.
Yeah, but it's definitely important to make sure that whatever you put out as your demo is like super polished. We've played some demos
Yeah,
where like the idea of the game sounds really cool. The visuals we've seen, the gameplay trailers, the all of the stuff that we've seen has been really cool. Then we've played the demo and it's like a really buggy mess.
yeah,
And like that's just going to put you off. And even with the sympathy and the empathy of like, I know how difficult this is to put together. I know how hard it is to create this, but you have not sold me on this because it's unplayable. So if you're going to do a demo, and our opinion would be you should produce a demo because it's a really, really powerful sales tool. Make sure if you are going to do it, you create the most polished experience you possibly can. Anything less than that is possibly going to harm your sales rather than help them. So just be careful. The demo is definitely one of those potential double-edged swords.
Oh, absolutely. But I think if you, I mean, you've got to test the hell out of the demo. Like
Yeah.
the demo isn't just like a working version of the game or the first level. Like it has to be it has to be what the product is going to be like when they buy it, or arguably better.
Yeah, or as close as possible as you can get to that. Um, it's so key. If you produce a really good demo, man, it's gonna help your sales so much. On the flip side, you put something out there because you felt you had to, and you didn't put much time into it, and it's horrible. It's gonna really impact your sales in a bad way. So definitely something to have, but just make sure it's done properly. I guess that's the case with all types of content, but more so with the demo than anything else.
But that's it. There's it's the problem because there's a lot of plates getting spun by indie devs, and like errors creep in. But this is the thing with marketing, like the marketing happens before anyone's even played your game.
Mhm.
So if you trip up there, no one even gets to play your game. Obviously, you don't want to get people to play your game and then hate it. You know, I'm not saying don't make the best game you possibly can, but what I'm saying is when you're making a game, these little slip ups, you know, sometimes unavoidable, become bugs, you know, and if it's really bad, you know, you end up with a game that's a buggy mess, and then people review it negatively, and that really hurts, you know, hurts the amount of people you get through the door to buy it in the future. The same is true of all your marketing materials. Like think about what you're doing. This is why we last time out we were talking about maybe have a dedicated Twitter account if you can, dedicated socials for the game, because you know as much as there is the artist in the game, you know, and especially in an indie game when it's if it's a solo dev effort, there's also a kind of people don't want to hear about your life or your random potentially alienating political opinion on your Twitter account. Like that is the kind, you know, that seems like an almost obvious marketing suicide to just overshare about your life or some random shit or give a like a really terrible hot take on Twitter when it should have been from your personal account and not the one for the game. But there's also the idea that something like a description on Steam where people have like like really messed up or like misspelled things and stuff like that, and it's like you're like if they couldn't put together a paragraph, you know, this is just me, and this is obviously coming from from someone who, you know, writes and translates for a living. So you know, despite my accent and affectation, language is important to me. If I read a small description on Steam and it's like atrociously written, I'm you know, you don't want to think that, but you will genuinely believe that someone who can't have that care and attention to detail in one paragraph of text probably isn't able to put together again. And that might not be true. That might not be true, but that is this is the kind of like
Well, you
thoughts that
think
go through people's
it's
heads.
yeah, you kind of think to yourself like, oh, if they can't even grammar check a paragraph of text, like what else have they missed in their game? Like, what bugs am I going to come across playing this thing? It definitely has an impact. You know, all the ways that you put your messaging out there are ways for your potential customers to find and interact and engage with your brand. And if you put out lazy messaging or poor messaging or subpar products, unpolished demos, all of them have a negative impact. You need to do all of these things, but you have to do them properly and give them the care and attention because if it looks like you've put together a really fantastic opening paragraph that tells people how, you know, about your game, it's going to lead them into reading the second paragraph, the third paragraph, to press play on
Yeah.
the trailer to download the demo, and they're going to have a really positive experience. If they have a negative experience from the initial paragraph, or because you've shown that you don't care about the text because, oh well, it's just text. I don't care about it. Like, it's not the game. But that's the way people are going to engage with it. They
Yeah.
haven't seen the code, they've seen the text.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people buying the game, if I'm being perfectly frank, don't care how complex it is to build it. They just want a fantastic experience when it comes to playing the game. Um,
Yeah, no one's
and
looking under the hood
that's
of
what they
these
want.
games
No,
to
because most people who play games don't have a clue how they're built. I'm one of those people who's quite happy to play games, and I have no idea. The only thing I know is it's intensely difficult to build a quality game.
well, this
I
is
have
why it's
absolute respect for
yeah.
people who do it, but it doesn't mean that I care as much about the code than the person developing the game. So this is one of these key things where the the developer's opinion about marketing and how it should be and how people maybe shouldn't care about it or why should have to. You've got to, and this is one of the main things I say to people, any business that I'm working with. It's not about you; it's about your customer.
Mhm.
How does your customer want to be spoken to? Where does your customer want to be spoken to? How does your customer expect you to speak to them? What's their level of what do they perceive as quality? What do they perceive as bad buying signals? What do they perceive as good buy? And you go off that. You don't go off any preconceived notions that you have about how you would do things. It's in purely, if you're trying to sell a game, it's purely about what you think, what your customer thinks, and you have to shed any idea that you've got of, oh well, that shouldn't matter. But if it matters to them, it matters,
Yeah.
and it should then matter to you. So this is where a lot of people fall down in a lot of different industries, but particularly when it comes to selling indie games.
Well, this is the same thing with the socials saying like, oh, it's very nice to be on Twitter, which it is for talking to devs. And there's a lot of devs where like I don't like this platform or this platform or this platform. It's like, but have you checked if there are potential players of your game on that platform? Because if you've not even, you know, if you've not even popped your head in the door and checked out this thing called Facebook, you might have heard about it. Yeah, it doesn't have a space for indie devs to hang out, but the entire community of people who'd be interested in your game could be on that platform. And also at this point, you're representing the game or the brand or your studio. You're not you anymore in a sense. Like
No.
like ourselves, like you at work, me at work, Indie Bandit Joe and Indie Bandit Jimmy are not necessarily the same people. I mean, Indie Bandit Joe has his beer off camera because then you don't see exactly how much I'm drinking. It's like it's branding. There's a reason, we don't use these lights when we're just hanging out in these rooms. Like, come on, people, this is
Speak
all.
for yourself.
I mean, yours are slightly better than mine, but yeah, that's kind of the point, though, isn't it? There's a reason we do this. There's a reason I've shaved. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a I don't keep my beard this fine until we're doing this. There's a reason we've took 3 or 4 years of doing indie bandits before we even put our ugly mugs on camera. Like, the we wanted to make sure, like, sorry, this is as good as it gets, people, but we kind of wanted to make sure when we did first do it that we were at least vaguely presentable. And I think I'd like to hope we've
Yeah.
managed that at least, and it will get better moving on. But before we had any equipment or any lights, it was just like, no, we can't even. That's not even a standard we
But
want to put across.
it's uh it's what people are expecting though, right? It's what our audience is expecting.
Yeah,
They're expecting a certain level of polish when it comes to producing these types of things. And we might not be like at the highest level at the minute, but we certainly think we've hit a certain standard. And we've also done this, and this entire series is based on answers that our audience gave us to a survey. So
yeah,
we're answering questions that our audience want answers to. We're touching on issues that our audience frequently have. Like, this is entitled, like, if there's two things when it comes to content, any type of content that you're producing, understand your audience and make that one of your key objectives. Understand everything you possibly can about them, about the things they want, the things they need, all that sort of stuff. Where are they based? Which platforms do they hang out on? How do they like to engage with their content? Really figure out all of that stuff in the most minute detail you possibly can. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's not that much fun, depending on who you are, I guess, but it's so key to producing content that the other thing is resonates with that audience,
Yeah.
provides value with that audience. Because otherwise, it's pointless creating it. If it doesn't actually do anything, if it doesn't motivate someone to read or engage with it, it's sort of a waste of your time to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense to do the research and the prep work first to understand your audience and what do they want, not what do you want, what do they want, and then produce stuff that resonates with them and provides value to them because then they'll engage with it. And then you can nudge them further and further down the funnel. They fall in love with your game more and more and more. Then on release day or sale day or whatever day it is, bang, you send them a message, much higher chance they're going to buy your game.
Yeah. What I might add to that is finding out who they are and what they want. One thing that does come up a lot is that obviously if indie devs want like we don't want if we don't want a product made by committee, which is one of the advantages of indie game dev, that it's not always the broadest market appeal. It's not just a game that everyone will think is yeah, all right. But if the dev is not going to adapt the product to the audience, then they have to find the audience that that product is for.
Yeah.
So, if in most cases I think there's a bit of give and take. There will be some like, lines in the sand that you're not willing to cross because it's, you have your vision. And, you know, the less willing you are to change your product to match the audience, the more you're going to have to go out and look for that exact audience. Because the more niche you're making it, if you found an audience interested and you are willing to make changes and concessions, then yeah, fine. Then you've already got the audience, and then you make the product that that audience wants. But if you're not willing to change the product for that audience, then you have to go out and find the audience. And like you said, to like the best detail, you have to work out where they hang out, what how they like to be spoken to. Because if the product's not going to be changed, then you have to change the channels and the messaging.
Yeah. And that's usually the way it goes. It's usually we have a product, we have an idea, let's go find out like this is the audience that wants this. Where are they? Who are they? How do they consume content, etc., etc. It's nearly always that way. It's very rare someone's going to go right. I found an audience. Now I'm going to produce a product for them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to something like this, which is it's often a passion product.
Yeah.
Something that creative people have their vision and their idea about what they want to create, which is fantastic. It's one of the things everyone we I think particularly love about indie games, and I think the gaming industry in general to a certain extent. Uh,
We also like
but
more of the same as well.
yeah, but you have to understand the motivations of your audience, how you can provide them with what they want when it comes to the content, so that
Yeah.
you have a best chance possible of selling as many copies or downloads or whatever it is of your game as you possibly can. If this whole thing is about um, selling your game and making it a commercial success.
Which is what this series is for. That's why
Yeah,
we're doing it. We started when we talked about the State of Independent Games report. We also noted that there are some people out there who are making an indie game with no real commercial ambition, and which is fine.
yeah,
That is as valid as any other reason to make a game. You can make a game for whatever reason you like, but we're here to help those that do have commercial ambitions for their game, and we're hoping to give them share some of our knowledge in marketing so that they can action that and sell their
get
game
started.
better. Yeah.
Get
And
started in the right way.
yeah, which leads us on to the very last bit of this. We'll wrap up with this. This is we've talked about obviously engaging with interested parties, and then things like the demo. I do want to add there's a don't forget that like you don't have to do this all yourself. There are ways to get marketing materials out there, like streamers, you know, like media outlets. Anyone who is like willing to take the time to like play your game and make some content about it, you know, could be worth their weight in gold, especially if there's if there's a streamer out there who regularly plays games that are very similar to the game you're making. If it seems like it's in their wheelhouse to play it, then you kind of want to get that into their hands, because you already, it's a kind of shorthand that they already have an audience that likes that kind of game. You can assume, these are some of these, like, with the right information, good assumptions you can make.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a streamer that plays a completely different genre all the time, trying out your game just because they've got a big audience, because it doesn't matter how big their audience is if it's an audience that probably has a predisposition to not liking the genre of game you're making. But if you find that, get it in the hands of the right people to show it off, know what their audience is, all you're doing is piggybacking their audience to become your audience, and kind of just their funnels leading into your funnel, and from there, you know, you can get, like we said, the last part of it is people want to see it being played. So streamers can be top and bottom of funnel. At least I'd say that's how I feel. They could make people aware of the game. There's a lot of games that became just people found out about because of streamers. In other cases, someone interested in a certain game will go watch a streamer play it because they don't have to pay for the game and they can see it being played. There's a lot of people who just want to, if there's no playable demo out for them to play, watching someone who's invested in the game already play it, that could be the last bit of content they need to go, yep, this is the game for me.
Yep. Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
so the very last thing someone has to do is buy the game, right? They've found out about it, they've engaged with it, they're pretty much convinced now. So, like we were talking about the demo and any kind of content that would not upset people, but kind of just turn them off the whole idea. Your storefront page is, or it could even be on your website if you're willing to set up the tools to actually distribute your game through your own website. That'd be great, but likelihood is it's going to be on a platform like Steam or Itch, or you know if you've done all the necessary checks and certifications and hoops jumped through to release on console, then on given consoles storefront page as well. But this is the last point where you can effectively turn people away from your game, and this is not what you want to do. So I put it here that the storefront page is almost like a I'm going to call it a meta funnel, a funnel within a funnel. You've got someone engaged, and you want to kind of reverse pyramid this whole thing. Front there, I've noted fronting the text with like the very general, and then even your text should be like a funnel. Like we said, start with the general introduction, explanation of what the game is. The first sentence should really just like sell the whole idea of the game. Then, people are going to read top to bottom, so let them scroll down and discover more if they are going to are going to be interested. If they're totally sold, most of these storefronts have the buy button there, so you're fine. But the last thing you want to do is someone see some random piece of lore right next to the buy button. They go, oh no, I thought it was a. It's like, yes, it is that kind of game, but I just thought I'd tell you about this random sub race in my hefty world build. And I'm like, oh nah, not for me. Like, mirror what you've done up till this point. Make sure it's got the same kind of polish. This is the last bit. Always have all the like general stuff first, and your more niche content or content for more engaged people towards the bottom, because these storefronts are like a microcosm for the funnel, because, well, it's the storefronts funnel. They're also operating an entire sales funnel, and they kind of want to sell your game, so don't hinder that process.
So probably what you could do here, if you're not sure where to start or what sort of information to have on it, is go look at games that have been successful and look at their storefronts and look at the types of content they're putting on there. And I bet, I mean, I haven't done too much research into this. I might be saying something completely wrong here, but I imagine it's keeping the information to just what's necessary at this point. You don't need, at this stage, to tell your potential buyers everything they want to know about the game. This is they're at the storefront. They're ready to buy. You know, they're not going to be on this page unless they're ready to buy or wish list your game, I guess. So at this point, just hit them with the essentials.
Well, Steam
And
has a small space for the descriptions,
does
which
here.
is
That's
which is
that's
excellent.
by design. You know that
Exactly. Itch
it
doesn't, and you tend to
right.
find this. Obviously, Steam has done this to for these very reasons we've just mentioned. Itch hasn't necessarily, and this is some of the problems I see with an indie games on with not always, but sometimes I'll be on Itch and I'll see an indie game and it will be several paragraphs about lore, and I'm like, but what kind of game is it? Whereas when
Yeah.
forced, obviously Steam has done this by design. When forced, you have to put that little like elevator pitch in the description of the game underneath the key art. Like this is how Steam works. Itch gives devs more freedom, which is kind of their angle, but it doesn't always result in the most, I guess, marketing savvy version of the presentation of the game because of this
No,
freedom it gives them.
when you're at the point of this is essentially closing the sale, you don't need to witter on.
Yeah,
You don't need to put fluff in there. You need to get to the point and sell the game. This is the point at which you close the sale now. Give them just the information they need and put the big button up there that says buy the game.
yeah.
You don't need to give them any more information than is necessary at
Well,
this
that's
point.
why
Now
all
it's
the
it.
images are
Go
there.
find
That's
go
why
find
all
examples,
yeah.
and you'll see that that's the case. You know, the best selling games don't have a storefront that's like 10 paragraphs long with all the information. You've already shared that with them anyway. They already know about this. Just hit them with the essentials and sell the game. Like close at this point. Your only objective with this page is to close the sale.
Yeah. I might also add like the idea of fronting, like you're closing the sale. You want that like bottom of funnel esque content. With Steam, it forces you to do it by the short description, and then there's more description you can put underneath, which is fine if people are like unsure. Then you can use that to dissuade their concerns. But
Yeah.
I might add also maintain the Steam page because I think there's a lot of devs who fill up the carousel with images of their game and forget to like shift some of maybe like the older, less polished content, either remove it as newer content would replace it, or shift it to like the back of the carousel. Because sometimes I'll see a game and I'm like, oh, that left a really bad impression on us the first time I saw it. There was there was some like really early build screenshots, and as I went on, the screenshots got better. Like shit, shift them around, make sure the best stuff is up there first. Make sure they can include trailers there as well. Again, not the like 4 minute trailer. Don't engage someone with a 4 minute trailer when they're at the point of clicking to buy your game. Just at this point, it's literally like you're ready to just
Here's
knock
a,
it out the park.
here's a quick recap. These are the reasons that you loved that you wanted to find out. Like it's almost like remember this,
Yeah.
buy the game. Like these are the reasons you fell in love with this project. Here's a quick reminder, buy the game. You're like, oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, bye.
Here's
Like you
30
just want
seconds of
that last
class visuals, and then like they're
yeah.
really hyped and they're like, oh man, now that I'm seeing it in action looking class, I'm gonna hit that buy button. I'm done. There we
They
go. It's
just want
in.
that quick reminder of why it was they wanted to buy the game in the first place.
Yep. And then you're done. And that's your sale. And theoretically, if you've done this right, not everyone will have taken the exact same route, but all of these are sort of like stepping stones on a pond. Some of them might have stepped left and some of them might have stepped right, but they were all working towards this end point. And then they reach that end point. They're on the other side of the pond. They're sat there with your game. We could go on obviously about post sales and stuff like that, but we're saving that for another day. So I think just and you can add to this, Jimmy. But for me, here was my little checklist. I think we might actually be putting something together for the site as well, just for like a companion article to this. But this was my quick marketing checklist for marketing an indie game. So socials, website, mailing list, visuals, key art, press kit, storefront page, and trailers. Not necessarily in that order, but mostly in that order.
Yeah.
I don't think I've missed anything. I think if you go around that, like, you could do website before socials. That's absolutely fine. I mean, they kind of have to go together at the same time because you'll need your website to link to socials. You know, but generally, I
Yep.
think you start with
Yeah,
those, and
yeah, I agree. The only thing I would add to this is just research up front. Just
yes,
before you sign up or do any of these things, just figure out where your audience is and how they want you to speak to them. And once you've got that, you'll know which socials to get involved in first if don't have tons of time to hit them all. How the website should look, the sort of information you want to display on your website. How often do these people want to be emailed, or do they even want to join a mailing list? I mean, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be a yes. So I would say so. What sort of visuals do they engage with the most? What resonates with them the most? How do they engage with a press kit? What do they want to see from a press kit? And what sort of calls to action work for them on a storefront page? If you do that research up front, filling out and doing all the other stuff on the checklist that Joe just mentioned will be a lot easier, and it won't feel like you're just finger in the wind type of stuff. Um, so figure all that out up front. Take a bit of time. Take longer than you think it's going to take. Do it properly, and then the rest of it is a lot easier.
it'll pay dividends when you get it right. I mean, I think I've mentioned this on every single stream, but Coca-Cola and McDonald's still advertise like marketing. Marketing works. Like these huge companies that you think should just be able to just like sit back, put their feet up, and let the sales roll in. Like
Yeah,
marketing is an ongoing and iterative process, and like you said, I mean, research. I mean, I was going to say it doesn't go without saying. I mean, it doesn't go without saying. Yeah, I said that right. And it's iterative. Like if you constantly research and constantly get your information and constantly like look at data. I mean, I don't mean like 8 hours a day, but I even thought, I even suggest that like as part of a game dev workflow, like set aside like a little bit of time every day to do a little bit of marketing. Like little and often is better than just like once a month going, right, let's market some stuff and see what happens. If you like, if you make that part of the process, which it should
yeah,
be and has to be, because games that aren't marketed don't sell. For every one like, you know, Fall Guys or Among Us, like this random indie game that just absolutely blows up. I mean, they also were already marketing that game, but for every one of these games that just seems to like blow up and be huge, there are like hundreds of thousands of indie games that don't make it because no one's ever heard of them. That's
yep,
literally the only reason. Like, if you don't have any, if one person hears of your game, they mightn't, it's very unlikely that they'll buy it. You need, that's how the funnel works. You need thousands of people hearing about your game. You know you're going to lose a lot of them at the first stage. A few of them are going to work their way down. That original number will decrease.
yeah. Well, the conversion rate of any product is never 100%. So
Exactly. But yeah, so research and don't be afraid to change it. Like I said, it's an iterative process. You do your research, you start on the best foot, but look, once you've started, that doesn't mean the research stops. You constantly evaluate, check what's working, and then go back. It's no different to testing. It's just something, it's just part of a process that you're doing to ensure the largest number of people will make it to that final stage of buying the game.
as Ruden's just said in the chat, achieve a critical mass. That's exactly what you're after.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll leave it for there. I think you've added the research. We've got the checklist. We'll put that together. As mentioned in the chat, we should post this on YouTube. We will be posting this on YouTube. Um, However, early access to these will be provided to our patrons. So anyone who supports us on Patreon will get access to these before anyone else. We'll also we distribute the audio for this as the podcast. The podcast is back finally after a long hiatus. And basically, obviously, we want all of this to be free, and it will be free at some point, but also we love and appreciate the support we get, but the more support we get, the more we feel we can help. We put this, we put the money we get from Patreon towards offering more to indie devs, so it kind of just reinvests itself. Plus, our Patreon has loads of cool stuff for indie devs, so I think that the perks themselves for every tier on our Patreon is worth the money we ask for on its own. Plus, you support us and help us to do more things like this. So obviously, if you're joining us live and aren't subscribed or following us on Twitch, then you can do that. If you're listening to this as a podcast episode, then we'd love the 5 stars on your podcast app of choice, but more important, we'd love some feedback. We're working on the format. And if you're watching this on YouTube long into the future, then like, comment, and subscribe. You know what what you have to do and what we need you to do. And obviously, any comments are welcome. There's a question form available as well that we'll include in show notes, descriptions, etc. If people want to ask questions ahead of the show, if they're not able to catch it live, then we're going to start like opening up the floor for people to ask questions, and we'll address questions from the audience. And I think that's
Do that as like that could work quite well as a not quick fire, but like get the questions, we go through them, we answer them, boom, 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 get through. I think that would be quite a good format for doing that once we get the questions in.
Yeah. If in the meantime, obviously, we can always, depending on how many people want to ask questions and how many questions they have, we can always leave some time in the middle of the show to either do that as a segment, or if we get if we have too many questions, then we can dedicate an entire stream to it and package that together. But ideally, we're hoping these offer enough information on a given marketing topic that they can obviously be watched or listened to in isolation, but also as part of a sort of a longer running series. So obviously, if this is the first one you've listened to, go back and listen to the previous ones. If you're listening at a point when, or watching when there's been more of them out, then try and watch them in order, but they don't necessarily have to be enjoyed in a specific order.
And obviously, you can keep referring back to them. There's no need to take all of it in at once. Bookmark them, and you can use them and just refer back to them whenever you want.
Of course, and we'll have the accompanying stuff going up on the website and everything like that, and like we've been preaching for the last couple of hours now, like, engage with us. We're on all the socials. We have a Discord. If you want, if you have questions to ask us, I ask that people don't DM us with these kind of questions, because I think it's really valuable for the community that they're asked publicly, either in the Discord or on Twitter, where, very happy to answer questions people have about marketing their indie games. It's just a shame if they get asked in DMs, because I've had conversations with devs, and at the end of them I thought, oh, that was really useful. That would have also been really useful for hundreds of other devs if we had that conversation out in the open or publicly. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, if someone's like, they don't feel comfortable asking it, then fair enough. We will always try and answer them anyway. But it's great if the question is relevant to other devs to have that conversation in public if you're comfortable with doing it.
absolutely. Anyway, I think we should leave it there. It's getting on. I think there's a lot of food for thought if you devs there. I'd say just start with those things. As Jimmy said, do your research. If you need any help, Indie Bandits are here, and you know where to reach us.
That's it, and thanks to everyone in the chat as well.
Yep, it's good chatting to you, and we'll I guess we'll catch you next time we do one of these. Yep.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Ta-ra. Big waves, rock and roll fingers for